Oh, come on, we can do this.
You hear that? The headliner.
At a shopping mall in Central Florida, a man named Mac runs a circus featuring some special animals. Mac has been in the business for 20 years, and the star of the circus has always been a mighty silverback gorilla named Ivan. While most people visit the circus to watch Ivan, who often does a good job at pretending to be angry, Mac also has some other animal performers to entertain the guests. The other animals include a baseball-playing chicken named Henrietta, a seal named Frankie, a toy fire truck riding rabbit named Murphy,
Animal show, the likes of which...
an elephant named Stella, a poodle named Snickers, and a parrot named Thelma. After each show, the animals return to their cages backstage and talk about different things in a special language which humans don't understand. A mutt also sneaks in every now and then to spend time with his best friend, who happens to be Ivan. Unfortunately, things haven't been going well for Mac lately because people aren't really attracted to the circus anymore.
The big top. Stella!
After a show, a girl named Julia sits near Ivan's cage and draws him in her book. Julia is the daughter of a man named George, who works at the circus. She's also close to the circus animals, but Ivan is her favorite. When she's through with her drawing, she shows it to Ivan, who seems to like it. Mac also sees the drawing and tells George that his daughter is talented. George says Julia got it from her mother, and Mac remembers that George's wife is ill.
Hey, Jules, that's a good one.
Mac asks if she's doing better, but George simply says she has good and bad days. Mac then gives Julia some money to buy new crayons. George says Mac doesn't have to do that, but he insists. Julia thanks Mac for the money and hugs him before heading out to buy the crayons. George notices that Mac is bothered about the future of the circus, and he tells his boss not to worry much because he's sure things will get better soon.
Don't even begin to cover food and rent.
Mac thanks George for the words of encouragement before turning to Ivan to complain that the money they've been making is barely enough for rent and food. He adds that if things don't change, the circus won't survive. As he asks what they'll do when that happens, he walks away after realizing that he's talking to a gorilla. Interestingly, Ivan understood everything Mac said, and he starts wondering if he's at fault for the low turnout. That night, while the friendly mutt is sleeping on Ivan's belly,
Don't worry, you'll see. I'm the headliner.
Ivan asks Stella if she remembers when the circus used to be packed with people. Stella says she does, and Ivan asks if things are now different, maybe because he has lost his edge. He says he can still be an angry gorilla if that's what people want, but he doesn't understand why people would want that. Stella says it's because humans only see animals in one way, and gorillas will always be angry creatures to them. Ivan says his dad used to tell him that anger is precious, and it should only be used to keep order or warn others of danger.
You're the headliner.
Stella doesn't know what else to say, but Ivan says he'll do his best to get the show back on track because he's the headliner. The next day, during the show, Ivan roars as loudly as he can, but he notices that the crowd isn't moved by his performance anymore. Later that day, Julia gives Ivan her old crayons and a drawing sheet before leaving the mall with her dad.
I see you watching me.
The friendly mutt then asks Ivan what he'll do with the crayons, but he says he doesn't know yet. As Mac leaves his office, Ivan tells the mutt to hide so that he won't be seen. The mutt says Mac will never find him, but Ivan believes he still has to be careful. Almost immediately, Mac sees the mutt inside Ivan's cage and looks pissed. He calls the security guard, Costello, and says he doesn't want to see the dog near the circus anymore. He adds that the last thing he needs is another animal to feed.
Let's give him a great show, okay?
After Mac angrily heads out, Costello thinks of a way to send the mutt out of the cage, but Ivan just scares the guard away. Much later, Ivan sees a beetle near his cage and decides to draw it. When he's through, the mutt sees the drawing and looks surprised. He then tries to guess what Ivan just drew, but after a few failed attempts, Ivan helps him out and says it's a beetle. The next day, when Mac arrives at the mall, he sees a man named Mike clearing his shop.
Oh, a beetle, huh?
Mac asks what's happening, and Mike says he's moving to the Galleria because he thinks he might be able to make sales there. Mac says he's sure things will get better at the mall, but Mike has doubts about this. The two men then wish each other good luck before heading their separate ways. After another disappointing show, Mac gets a call from someone who gives him some good news. Mac looks really happy and tells the person that they've just made his year. Meanwhile, Julia draws the mutt inside Ivan's cage and names him Bob. When she's about to leave the circus with her dad, she sees Ivan's drawing and looks amazed. She calls her dad to take a look, and George says Ivan made a little scribble. Julia says it's a beetle, and Ivan looks surprised. George still doesn't see the beetle, but he says it probably takes an artist's eye to see it. After this, Julia says goodnight to Ivan, and Bob, who laments that he doesn't even like the name. The next day, Mac leaves his office looking excited, and Bob sneaks in to eat Snickers food.
Ration kibble. Go.
Snickers eventually catches him in the act and asks why he can't just give in to domesticity. Bob says he just likes his freedom and everything that comes with it. Snickers then tells Bob that today's show has been canceled because Mac is expecting the delivery of a new animal. Bob looks surprised, but Snickers tells him not to inform the other circus animals.
Tell anyone. They might get upset.
Bob says he won't, but immediately he steps out of Mac's office. He spills the news. The circus animals look excited and start wondering what the new animal could be. Just as the delivery truck arrives, it turns out that the new animal is a baby elephant, and Stella helps her get comfortable. George looks amazed, and Mac says he's really excited because everyone loves baby animals. He adds that the elephant's name is Ruby, and even though she has never performed before, he's sure she'll turn things around in no time.
Oh, I hate surprises. I can't look.
Ivan looks shocked when he hears this, and he wonders if Ruby will steal his role as the circus main act. That night, while Ruby is sleeping next to Stella, Ivan stares at her while thinking about what Mac said earlier. As he looks sad, he lies down and decides to sleep. Before he can close his eyes, Ruby stands next to his cage and asks if he's a monkey. Ivan looks shocked and says he's a gorilla, and Ruby asks if there are others like him.
Who's that?
That's not Tag.
Ivan says he's the only gorilla in the circus, and Ruby asks about the stuffed toy in Ivan's cage. Ivan grabs it and says the toy's name is not Tag. Ruby asks why it's named like that, and Ivan says it's a long story. Ruby looks excited and says she loves stories, but Ivan says he's busy. Ruby then says she's sorry that he's the only gorilla in the circus. Ivan doesn't seem interested in talking to her, and he says he doesn't care much because he has always been the only gorilla in the circus.
So, run along.
Bob also tells Ruby that the name of the show is The One and Only Ivan, and it has been like that for years. As Bob says Ivan is the headliner, Ruby asks why. Bob says it's because Ivan is a silverback who terrifies humans, but Ruby doesn't think he's terrifying. Ivan looks shocked and says he's very scary. He also tells her to go away before he starts roaring with rage. The next day, during Ivan's performance, Mac signals to Costello to close the curtains. Ivan doesn't understand this, but Mac suddenly introduces Ruby to the guests and calls her the new headliner. Ivan cannot believe this, but Ruby becomes an instant hit at the circus, and the guests look happy to see her. Later that day, while the other animals are talking about how the guests loved Ruby, Ivan looks disappointed in his cage. As Ruby then tries to strike up a conversation with him, he just ignores her until Bob tells him to say something to her.
I'm hungry. I love carrots.
The next day, Ruby becomes the new star of the circus, and the hall gets packed with people there to see her. Ivan doesn't like this, and he tells Bob that it's supposed to be his job to save the circus, not a baby elephant. Bob then jokes that he doesn't think Ruby got the memo. Later that day, after the show ends, Julia notices that there's something wrong with Stella's foot, and she tells her dad. After George and Mac take a look at the injured foot, they don't see anything wrong with it on the outside.
So well in the show. Everybody's coming to see you. you.
and they assume that it's probably infected. Max says he'll call the vet to come over tomorrow, and George tells Julia that Stella will be fine. That night, Stella praises Ruby for how well she has been performing at the circus. Ruby says she's sorry about Stella's injured foot, but Stella says it's just tired of carrying her around after all these years. She then offers to tell Ruby a story before going to bed. Ruby looks excited, and Ivan also sits near their cage so he can hear the story.
Make sure there's aspirin in her food tonight.
Stella then tells a story about her time in the wild as a baby elephant. She says she once fell into a hole and got stuck in some very deep mud. As she struggled to find her way out of the hole, a little girl saw her and went to call the people from her village to help. Stella says they eventually pulled her out, but Bob doesn't think humans are capable of being that kind. Stella then tells Ruby that not all humans are bad and some can surprise her.
Hey, why'd you do that?
This is a good one.
Ruby asks if all animals are free in the wild, and Stella says they are. Ruby also asks if they'll ever be free, but Stella just says there are safe places around where animals can roam free, like in the wild. Ruby looks happy, and Stella explains that those places are where humans make amends for the bad things some of them have done. The next day, George notices that Stella still has problems with her foot, and he tells Mac that he thinks she should stay back. Mac agrees and says that Ruby will have to go out on stage alone. When the show begins, Ruby looks scared and tells Stella that she doesn't think she can face the crowd alone. Stella says she'll do just fine, but Ruby isn't sure about this. As Mac is about to present Ruby to the audience, Bob tells Ivan to do something because the baby elephant will miss her cue. Ivan then encourages Ruby and says the guests will love her. Ruby asks if he's sure, and he says she just has to go out and be herself.
Sweetheart? She'll be fine.
After Mac calls Ruby out a few times, she eventually shows up and everyone admires her. Ivan and Stella also express relief about Ruby's performance. That night, Ivan notices that Ruby is having difficulty sleeping and he asks what's wrong. Ruby says she's hungry and Ivan offers to draw her a carrot so she can look at it until she gets a real one. Ruby looks amazed and asks if he can draw, and he says he can. However, he tells her not to tell anyone because he doesn't want the other animals to start coming to him for drawings. After Ruby sees the drawing of the carrot, she tries to wake Stella to show her, but Ivan tells her not to do that. He then asks if she would like to hear a story, and Ruby says she wants one from when he was little. Ivan says he can't remember things from that far back, and Bob jokes that he's the complete opposite of an elephant. Bob also asks if Ruby would like to hear a story about his life. Ruby says she doesn't mind.
She did.
And Bob tells her a sad story of how he was abandoned in the streets by a mean human. Ivan doesn't think that's a good story to tell Ruby, and he says he has a better one. He then tells the story of how he was adopted by Mac and his wife when he was a young gorilla. They were so caring that he slept in the same bed with them and joined them on trips to fun places. Mac also made some money by allowing people to pose for pictures with Ivan. Things kept going well until Ivan started making messes around the house, just like most gorillas do. Unfortunately, Mac's wife didn't like this, and she left Mac when she got tired of the situation. This left Mac devastated, and he eventually moved the baby gorilla to the circus, where he has been living since. As Ivan finishes up with the story, he notices that Ruby is already asleep. Stella then calls Ivan and tells him to promise to take care of Ruby. She adds that she wants Ruby to be free in the wild instead of living in a cage. Ivan says he understands, and he promises to help Ruby. After this, Stella says goodbye to Ivan before taking her last breath. Ivan and the other animals feel sad about this, and Mac also thinks about how Stella's death might affect his show. On his way home, he consoles Ruby and says they'll start working on her act tomorrow. Later that night, Ruby cries in her cage, and Bob consoles her until she falls asleep. When Bob returns to Ivan's cage, Ivan asks how Ruby is doing. Bob says she's still sad, but he was able to cheer her up
I'm the one and only Ivan.
by telling her that Ivan will save her and help her escape. Ivan asks why he would say that, and Bob tells him not to forget the promise he made to Stella before she died. Ivan says he shouldn't have made the promise because he doesn't know how to get Ruby out of the mall. He adds that he can't just leave Mac because they've been together for a long time. Bob says he's sure Ivan will figure something out because he's the one and only Ivan. Ivan feels more confident about helping Ruby, and he says he'll think of something. The next day, Mac starts training Ruby to work on her act. Bob and Ivan don't look happy about this because Mac is forcing Ruby to do things at a fast pace. As Mac tries to get Ruby to place her leg on a small stand, Julia sees this and notices that Ruby is tired. Julia points this out to George, but Mac seems pissed and says that he's also tired. He adds that he's probably the only one who understands that they need money to keep the circus running. George suggests letting Ruby rest, but Mac says he has already made some progress.
Bunk up.
And they have to continue like that. As he then continues forcing Ruby to lift her leg, Ivan looks pissed and roars gently. Mac doesn't seem moved by this, but when Ruby gets tired of hearing him yell at her, she spits in his face and a part of his wig blows off. Mac feels embarrassed and walks away, and Bob finds this funny. Later that day, Yvonne draws a key on a sheet of paper and asks if Bob can guess what it is. Bob makes a few wrong guesses, but Yvonne eventually says it's a key. He adds that he'll try to convince Julia to help them get the keys to the cages from Costello. Just then, Ruby asks what they're up to, and Ivan asks if she wants to hear a story. Ruby says she doesn't mind, and Ivan tells her a story about a young, brave elephant who was trapped in a cage but needed to return to the wild. Ruby asks if the elephant got to be free, and Ivan says she eventually escaped because she had a friend who made a promise. Ruby looks happy to hear this, and she realizes that the story is about her.
You want to hear a story?
The next day, Ivan shows Julia his drawings. As she looks at them, Max sees her and asks if Ivan really drew them. Julia says he did, and this gives Mac an idea for his show. After he takes the drawings from Julia, he decides to invite people to come and watch Ivan draw. Ivan looks disappointed by this, and when it's time for the show, he refuses to draw. He also leaves the stage, and Mac does some damage control by telling the guests to head to a nearby room to check out some of Ivan's drawings. After this, Max scolds Ivan for what he did earlier. He says that Ivan has to realize that a baby elephant can't save the show, and it's all up to him. Suddenly, he sees Bob inside the cage and angrily calls Costello. He then threatens to fire Costello if he sees the dog inside the cage again. That night, while Costello thinks of how to take Bob out of the cage, Ivan gets an idea to steal the key from the guard. Shortly after, Bob lures Costello into the cage.
Well, you're stuck in a cage all day doing tricks for human.
While Ivan pretends to be asleep. As Costello enters the cage, Ivan stands behind him and he passes out. Ivan then steals the key and releases Ruby, who asks where they're going. Ivan says they're going to the forest opposite the mall, and Ruby asks if he's not taking the other animals. Following this, Ivan releases all the animals and they prepare to leave together. Bob also tries to get Snickers to come with them, but she says she prefers to stay back because there are no blow dryers in the wild. Bob and the others leave without her, but when they get to the door, they realize that it's locked. As Ivan thinks of what to do, Bob just tells him to break the door. After he does this, the animals look happy to be free. Ivan then leads them toward the forest opposite the mall. While crossing the road, Murphy gets stuck in his toy fire truck. Before a car hits him, Ivan quickly takes him out of the truck. Murphy isn't happy that the truck got destroyed, but he says he feels much better walking on the ground. The animals then walk into the woods.
Guys, go! Everybody hide!
And a passing driver sees them but thinks he's hallucinating. Meanwhile, Costello wakes up and calls Mac to inform him that the animals have escaped. Mac looks shocked and immediately drives to the mall. When he gets there, he sees the damaged door and realizes that Ivan helped all the animals escape. As he then looks outside the mall and tries to figure out where the animals went, he decides to check out the woods. While Ivan and the others are walking through the woods, they figure out that the forest is just a small intersection surrounded by more houses. This leaves them disappointed, and before they can think of what to do next, Mac shows up and tells them to come back to the circus with him. He tells Ivan that they're family, and he has to look out for the safety of the others because it's risky for them to be outside. Ivan realizes that Mac is right, and he looks disappointed that he couldn't help Ruby escape. After they all return to the mall, George arrives, and Mac thanks him for showing up. He then tells George that no one must know what happened.
Where's Costello?
Gone. I fired him.
because if the city finds out, the circus would be shut down. The next day, Ruby asks Ivan what it's like in the wild. Ivan says he doesn't remember, but Bob tells him to try. Ivan then tells a story of how he lived in the wild with other gorillas. He says his parents called him Mud because he liked it and mostly used it to draw on different surfaces. His father found this weird and tried to teach him to be strong and fearsome, but this didn't come naturally to him. Despite this, his father still loved him, and he spent a lot of time playing with his sister, Tag. Yvonne adds that things went well for him and the other gorillas until poachers came to hunt them. Ivan's dad quickly placed him high up in a tree, and from there, Ivan watched the poachers kill his dad and some other gorillas. Ivan then explains that he named the stuffed toy not Tag because it would never be the same as his sister. He adds that he always thought that if he had learned how to be strong, he could have helped his troop. Bob says humans are bad, but Ruby reminds him that Stella said some of them are good.
Humans are the worst.
After this, she thanks Ivan for the story before going to bed. The next day, Julia gives Ivan some finger paints that she just received as a gift from her aunt. She says she heard what happened last night, and she knows Ivan doesn't want to be in a cage anymore. She says she wishes she could help because she has always wondered why animals have to be in cages or why people have to be sick like her mom. She says that's why she loves drawing, because she can just draw things the way she wants, and if it looks great, there's a possibility that it will come true. She also shows Ivan a drawing of her mom looking healthy and says that's how she wants things to be. Shortly after, Ivan thinks about what Julia said and remembers how he used to paint with mud as a young gorilla. He then comes up with an idea and decides to paint on the glass wall of the enclosure where he performs. The next day, Mac arrives at the mall and is approached by a reporter named Candace, who asks about the rumors of animals escaping from the mall.
Candace Taylor, WNMZ.
Mac denies this and invites Candace to come in for the show if she wants. Candace looks happy about this and decides to stay for the show. Interestingly, Ivan is still painting on the wall, and as the show begins, Bob tries to get him to hurry up. Before Bob can say anything, though, he sees the painting and realizes what Ivan is trying to do. When it's time for Ivan's performance, everyone looks at his enclosure and sees the painting. They all look surprised, and Mac says that Ivan is quite the artist. As everyone applauds Ivan, he looks through the glass and stares at Julia, who suddenly realizes that it's a painting of the wild. Julia then runs to inform her dad that Ivan is trying to tell them that he wants to be in the wild again. George says there's nothing they can do, but Julia believes Candace can help. George looks worried because he could lose his job, but he eventually allows Julia to talk to Candace. The next day, Candace reports on the news that Ivan's painting is a sign that he wants to be free. Mac looks shocked as he watches the news.
What's happening?
But before he can do anything, protesters arrive at the mall demanding the release of Ivan, Ruby, and all the circus animals. Ruby doesn't understand why there are people yelling their names, and Ivan says it's because the crowd wants them to be free. After a while, Mac gives up on trying to save the circus, and a group of people, led by a doctor named Maya, arrive at the mall to take the animals away. When Ruby is about to leave, she asks Ivan if he thinks the other elephants in the wild will like her. Ivan says he's sure of it, and she says she'll tell the other elephants about him, Stella, and everyone else. Maya then tells Ruby to enter a transport crate, and she does this after saying goodbye to Ivan. Bob also shows up to say goodbye to Ivan, who asks where he'll go next. Bob says he'll figure something out, and Ivan gives him not Tag as a gift. Bob thanks his friend for this, and as he sees Mac entering the cage, he looks scared. However, Mac smiles and says there's no need for Bob to run away. Bob then looks relieved and gently leaves the cage.
The day I brought you home.
After this, Mac reminds Ivan of the good times they shared. Ivan also feels sad because he'll miss Mac, who says goodbye before heading out. When it's time for Ivan to leave the cage, he seems hesitant because he has been with Mac for most of his life. Maya then encourages him to enter the transport crate, and he does just this. After a while, Ivan wakes up in a white room and looks scared because he thought he was going to end up in the wild. Maya then calms him down and opens the door to show him that they've just just arrived at the zoo. Ivan looks relieved and walks into the zoo, where he sees some gorillas and a couple of other animals. As he continues moving around, he climbs a tree and sees Ruby playing with some bigger elephants. This makes Ivan happy, and he looks up at the sky and says he hopes Stella is happy that Ruby is now free. After spending several years in a circus together, Ivan loses his friend, Stella, who makes him promise to help a young elephant escape so she can be in the wild where she belongs. Ivan initially seems unsure about this, but when he sees Mac desperately trying to teach Ruby an act for the show, he decides to do everything he can to help all the animals regain their freedom. Things don't go well at first, but after Julia figures out the meaning of Ivan's painting, she informs a reporter who gets the public to demand the release of the circus animals. Following this, Ivan and the others are taken to a zoo to live freely and interact with other animals.